Hello folks, and welcome to the HQ of Formula One's newest team. We've been invited backstage to gain an exclusive insight into what could be one of the most exciting entries in the sport for many years.
Hello, Brandon.
Howdy.
I've been just so people kind of get an idea what this is. I've had this idea kicking around. We've done it here and there, not a whole lot. This after a weekend idea, not really a show.
Impressions.
Yeah, impressions of a game that's recently come out.
Hot takes.
And yeah, long time until the next frame trap. And
That's the thing, you get reviews. It's like you've already beat the game. You're past credits. You probably haven't played that game in 2 whole days. You are fresh. You got F1 on the brain right now. You're in the Nexus.
And also, a game that we may not review, which F1 is like this perfect thing because it's like I've put 12 hours into this game. I'm nowhere close to where I would be to like get anywhere close to a review. But yeah, so F1, it's a game. It's a game. I guess I usually describe it as what like the most work that a game can be. F1 is kind of in that ballpark.
What a sell!
Because it is just so hardcore, and like there are options that like you can make it less hardcore, right? Like you can make it so that like you just do a 5-lap race and there you go, you've got it, But like it has that ability to expand and contract to different things, and you can get that more authentic experience. Oh yeah, and so like changing the race lengths, because like the full race length on some of these tracks is like 50, 60 laps long. Like it's just brutal, I kind of go on like a shorter, like it's like 25% settings. And so that's like 25, 30 minutes for the race. But then you also have, the option of what are you going to do? Practice sessions? Are you going to do qualifying session?
Right.
If you do a qualifying session, is it going to be, just one lap and like it just takes that lap? Or are you going to do a few laps or a full session? Like all of these different options, right? One of the new options that I actually just checked out a little bit last night is they actually call it casual mode. So you go from standard mode to casual mode. There's a big like Y button prompt
Do
there.
they put like
a
a pacifier in your mouth for your avatar or something? Or like is that little baby bonnet?
But number one, the one thing I actually didn't expect, they actually, when you do that, they actually simplify the options that are available. So you don't have to look through this long list of like, do I want parc fermé rules? Do I want to manage fuels? Like it's like, nope. Here you go. You want to turn this on or off? Do you want to turn these things on or off? We're going to hide a lot of the other stuff so you don't have to worry about it.
Like a casual does.
It also has steering and braking assists, which is really funny because it's like you come up to a turn and your car just automatically starts braking even if you haven't.
Oh, I think assists, like arrows. Like the yellow line starts to turn red when you're supposed to brake. But it actually...
Yeah, those are on there too.
It actually handholds you through the braking. Oh.
Yeah, but what's funny about that is it was actually making it hard for me to pass.
Oh yeah, that would
because
be
a
weird.
lot of times you just like brake a little bit later, a little bit softer than the guy you're coming up on, and well, now the game's braking for me right now, so I can't quite get that rhythm. Like, when do I pass this guy? And then the grip is a lot more solid. If you go off track, you're less likely to totally spin out and lose control. And so it was kind of funny doing that like after 12 hours of like more like not full on hardcore, not with like traction control off and all of these other things, but with my custom settings, and that's the thing. It's like I just kind of find this sweet spot that sort of works for me.
Of course,
has a little bit of that driving line there, but not a whole driving line.
Well, even if it's not a sweet spot, you spend several hours getting tuned to how a car feels, how tracks move. You change anything, like that'll throw you off your game.
And part of it too is just, like if I were going to be spending more time with this is like, okay, I'm more comfortable now. Now let me turn off something else and go with that. Now let me turn on fuel management, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, so what I was doing is essentially short settings and practice sessions. So you get 3 30-minute practice sessions, qualifying session, and then a race that's somewhere between like 14 to 18 laps, depending on the track, depending how long the course is. And that process per race is like 1.5 to 2 hours, by the time you're done with it all.
Yeah, you say 12 hours. It's like that's 7 races or what or so.
I think I've done 5 races. And in addition to some other stuff that I'll get into here. I also wanted to focus on the new My Team mode, so that's where I spent most of my time. I did check out a little bit of the traditional career just as a comparison. It's like, okay, like what does career do that my team mode isn't doing, and what is my team mode doing that career isn't doing? And the main difference is that my team is a lot more management focused, whereas the standard career is really just about being on track. So you do have practice sessions and qualifying sessions and stuff in the career, but you don't have a lot of this extra stuff in between races. And then the other thing that career does is you have, again, optional choice to go through a Formula 2 season before you graduate to Formula 1. So again, you can do a couple of those races, you can do a full season, or you can do, this kind of, because Formula 2 has this extra thing in there that's kind of interesting, which they call the sprint race. So it's like a shorter race after the main race. Like I think it's like the top 8, the finishing positions from the main race get reversed. So if you were in first place, now you're going to be in 8th place, and now you work through this shorter race. And so again, with the Formula 2 stuff, you can play with sprint mode, with the sprint races and the regular races. You can play with just regular races, or you can skip F2 altogether and just jump into F1. But like I said, my team is where I've spent most of my time. There's some aspects of my team here that I do remember from like last year's F1 game, particularly like R&D and stuff. But in general, it's just way more management focused. And so sort of the setup here, the thing they focus on is this idea that you are an owner/driver. So you're on you're in the car, you're on the course, but you also own this team. You're responsible for everything that goes into it, from the logos to the marketing to the engineers.
Wow. Is that common? Do you know? Does that happen a lot?
They actually addressed that at some point in there, and it's something that it has happened in the past. It has not happened anytime in like the recent past. But yeah, I think it's probably something that, like, just as the sport has grown, it's probably not feasible now.
Kind of reminds me of actors who direct their own movies. It's like not really a question of skill; it's more ego. It's not like maybe not the best way we should do this. It's just they want to try it once, or they really like the property, or whatever.
So you actually spend a fair amount of time with the game before you even get out on the track at all, because you have to set up all this stuff. You have to you have to create your character. You have to pick a name. One thing that's funny is Codemasters games always. They try to include the player by having the commentators actually say your name. So they'll so you've got this long list of names that they've recorded audio from. And in the past there have been Dans and Daniels, but for some reason they didn't this time around. So I'm like,
what?
Okay,
not even a Dan?
No, not even a Dan this time.
What?
But I got to do.
I was like, I might not be out because you get the little license plates at the airport and everybody names. And I remember as a kid, I was always like, "Where's Brandon?" Like it's it's not like a super unusual name, but like Daniel is, wow.
But they do have some kind of flavor picks, and I went with Old Timer. So all throughout after every race, they're like, and at the top of the grid, it's Old Timer. So funny. Especially as like a rookie driver, right? Yeah. It feels like that Nathan Fillion show or something.
Well, I've talked about the joy of potentially doing that for years. I would just record 1,000 things. Splinter Cell, Master Chief,
right?
And then you just put that in when you need it. I don't have to do pickups anymore. What's your team name?
Easy A Performance.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought that worked, and I went. I think my first couple of races I hadn't customized the car really yet. But eventually I do get like a red, black, and white theme going.
Cool.
And then there's emblems and things that you can choose between as well. One important thing is choosing sponsor and choosing a second driver, because F1 teams are 2 drivers. And you have to balance the budget on that, like right off the bat. So you have to find a sponsor that is going to pay you an amount that is going to cover what you're going to pay this driver.
Do you change sponsors later, depending on performance? Or
I think after a season, they're actually it does actually say how long a contract is for, and then later in the season you can start signing additional sponsors to have extra spots on your car and stuff like that. And one of the things that's interesting with sponsors is you're not only managing like what they're going to pay you as like a standard contract, it's like kind of like a standard weekly paycheck, but then there are also like goals that you have to hit that you'll get bonus payouts for. So like if you get first place wins, or if you get in the points at all, or if you get in the top 10. So like all of these different things, like, okay, balancing how much money do I want to make and what do I think I can actually pull off here in these races with a new fresh car. The next thing you've got to choose is who's going to provide the power unit, the main engine for your vehicle. So you've got to pick between like, Mercedes and Ferrari, and I think there's like 4 or 5 different options for the power unit. That's also something you got to put money down for. So it's like, oh, I really want that engine, but I also want this driver. So like, where is it going to balance out?
That second driver, do you control them later? Do you just go back and forth between drivers, or is that just an AI thing?
It's just an AI thing, but you do invest in them.
Yeah.
So like with like a lot of your engineering departments, you kind of invest in their morale and their ability, and same thing with the drivers. Like one of the things you can invest money in is getting that driver in the simulator more, getting that driver in the gym more. Just like all of these different. And
do you watch them drive, or is it just like a stats after the fact thing?
It's a stats after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
You can call your team and have them update you, or sometimes they'll just automatically update you and say like, you're 10 seconds ahead of your teammate, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, and yeah, so one of the other interesting things is there is a calendar, and so you have however many days or weeks between the time that you're in the shop, I'll say, just the home base, and when you're actually going to have a race weekend. So sometimes that'll be shorter, sometimes it'll be longer, but you have this selection of activities that you can schedule. So you can schedule press tours, you can schedule merchandise sales, you can schedule parties for specific engineering departments. There's 4 engineering departments. There's aero, durability, chassis, and powertrain. And so you can invest in those different garages, essentially, those different elements, but you can also invest by, doing these different parties, doing things for your team. And so each one of those will take up a certain amount of days on the calendar. And then there's also your R&D, and the R&D was definitely in past games. I remember this. There's like a skill tree that branches out. It's like 4 different directions of those same different departments. And depending on how much you've invested in them, generally you start off with them only being able to develop like 1 new part at a time for your vehicle. And that's something else that takes so much time on the calendar. And that can run concurrent with your events, but they also don't have it. There's like a failure rate as well. So you can put all this time into developing a part, and then you get to the end and it's like, oh, it didn't work out. You can put it into redevelopment and won't cost as much to do that because they're just figuring out how to fix it. But it will take extra days before that part's available to fit to your car and actually improve your vehicle.
For a racing game, nothing happens fast.
And then,
but you really, it sounds like you really got to live with this thing. Like that really is the way it is designed. That like this is going to be a part of your life, kind of like how an MLB game will like simulate an entire season. Or like, nope,
Yeah, and so with that, you also need research and development points, and that plays into the practice sessions. So when you actually do get out on the track, so again, there's 30-minute sessions, and those are real-time minutes. Like once that session starts going, I think you can pause, but even though if you just sit in the garage, time is just going to pass, and you can accelerate time to just like let the weather pass, or to let other cars clear out of the track and go back in the garage when they're done with their practice and stuff. But then there's I think 7 or 8 different practice programs that you can engage in to basically give the team more data and also to get you familiarized with the track. And that's one of the things that I really love about F1 is kind of this long-term, like learning how your vehicle responds on each course, how you deal with the elevation changes, where you're going to lose grip and all this kind of thing. And so you do these simulations where, okay, we're going to practice, your tire management. Like make sure that you know how to take these turns in a way that isn't going to wear your tires out too quickly. Same thing with fuel management. Learn, okay, how to coast into these corners so that you don't burn out all your fuel too quickly. And then there's kind of the more hardcore ones that you really need to do is like the track acclimatization, where there's like a series of gates that you have to hit. So he's like, you have to hit the gates, but you also need to be going through it with enough speed. And so like every time you hit that gate, you know, it's like you get a red, you missed it. You get a green, you did okay, or you get a purple, you know. And so like, okay, that's how you want to hit that turn, you know. And then you've got, you know, to do that about like 3 times generally in the practice session. And so those get, like I said, those get you personally comfortable with the track, but then they also get you those points, and there's also bonus objectives and stuff. But you can't I don't think you could run all 8 of those in one practice session. So that's another thing too, is between your 3 practice sessions, okay, when am I going to get comfortable with this system? Do I actually want to warm up with these other programs before I do my full acclimatization, so that way I can just like really nail it, because I already know this track a little bit. You do really well, then you got more points for your R&D to get better parts for the next race.
And you really feel like that practice pays off? You're saying it's one of your favorite parts of the game. Like, do you feel yourself getting better?
Yeah.
You're not just like, you know, stats and stuff like that getting better, but you are getting more comfortable with the course. You're applying the lessons that they're trying to teach you.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. You really, yeah. You get, again, it's about that long haul that I like, which is why I don't, you know, do the like even shorter versions of things. When you get to qualifying, then there's you can choose between like either like a full qualifying or one-shot qualifying, and then you've got the race, and you know, and they've got a lot of the presentation like really built up over the years, where like now you see all the reporters out on the grid and stuff. And another thing I didn't talk about are after races and such, and sometimes even in between at different points, you have to do press interviews. And this is something that they flirted off and on with the series, but it's like a Telltale kind of thing. It's like they'll ask you a question about like, you know, why were you having trouble out there or whatever, and like, or like, why did you do so well? And like, you can give credit or blame to different departments to your team, or take it for yourself. And it's funny because it's like your aero department will remember that. It's very Telltale.
How does that affect them? Do they work harder then, or could they potentially get burned out after a while? Or
I think it might affect stuff like failure rate and stuff, because like I said, there is a morale. You can have, you know, good, bad, or excellent morale on each of those different departments. And then there was actually an interview I did with Will Buxton, which is funny because I haven't watched F1 in a long time, but when I watch F1, like he's a key commentator that I'm used to from years and years. So it's funny. He's like, "Oh, Will Buxton is actually in the game now. Like, when did that start? Is this the first time? I don't know." That's funny. He doesn't entirely look like him. You know, it's like the models are like maybe more wrinkly than I remember.
Wait, are you telling me they're spending more time on the car models than the announcer models?
I think they've gotten better though, like overall over the years. But yeah, so that's interesting. And then they also at a few races, then they start an interviewer essentially has you pick a rival. You know, it's like, who are you gunning for out there? And then so there's kind of this like versus like back and forth between how you're doing versus how your rival is doing overall. But yeah, let's get to the racing. Like I said, very much about long haul. I don't necessarily like to use things like always having a braking line on, or like the flashbacks, the rewinds. But it's like, you know, I think it's like I said, like unless I'm like really going to like hardcore invest in this, because the races are so long, it's like I feel like let me use that a little bit, just like because there's just it's such a matter of endurance, anyways. And there are definitely a few times that I've rewound here and there. I try not to abuse it. Basically, like if I totally spin out, then I'll rewind. I think a lot of times like it becomes just a matter of my brain just wandered off somewhere for a second. You know, it's like I made a mistake because my brain started thinking about something other than driving right now, and like, oh crap. Because you do, like, it does start becoming like a thing where like you're feeling it out rather than thinking like, okay, I've got to do this here, I got to do that, and then like it's that little thing, it's that little loss of focus that just kills it.
Yeah. I think of that same way in like a Souls boss. Like you get halfway through that health bar, you're just like, okay, you know, you definitely need to stay emotionally at the same level the whole time.
But I do really like stuff like tire wear is one of the things I've always appreciated with F1 that I don't really get out of other racing games, where like you feel the grip change between when your tires are fresh and you're coming out and they're cold, and you know, and you slip a little bit, and then they warm up and they're more grippy, and then they start to wear down and you lose traction again, and just like that ebb and flow during the race, and just fighting the car on that kind of thing. One thing that's really terrifying in this, that I don't feel like I had as much of a struggle with in past games, is fuel. Just
Yeah,
like,
you were talking about that on Slack. Yeah.
your pit manager will call you up and he'll start telling you, he's like, okay, you've got 5 laps of fuel left, and you look, and I'm like, I've got 6 laps to go. I've got, because they really do, like, they fuel the cars so that you don't have too much weight in them to
Right,
just be
of
like
course.
right exactly what you need. And so like they've got all of these systems just monitoring every little thing. And so yeah, so then it's like, okay, now I've got to stop worrying about speed as much and focus on conserving fuel a bit, you know, coasting into those corners, coming out of them a little bit lighter, not as heavy on the gas.
There's no push mechanic. You can't just like get out on the side and like steer.
The default, for whatever reason, the default of the AI is set to be pretty easy. And so like I got through my first couple of races, like hitting the pole position. And so then I bumped it up to medium, which another thing that's crazy is they have like 100-point scale on this AI. I don't know why I need that. I don't know why
On enemy AI? On your the other
on the driver AI.
Drivers.
So like I don't know why I would want to pick 21 over 20.
Yeah,
Like it's
well,
just
you know, come on. After
that's
all the
so marginally
specifications
different.
we talked about,
Sure.
you got to crank that. Just dial by dial. Just turn you turn it up just by one
Right.
every race until you really start feeling the heat.
Oh, you do get a little bit of, even if you are ahead, you do get a little bit of that competition, like when you go into the pits, because like you go into the pits and you come out and you're at like 9th place for a little bit, and so it's like, okay, now I've got to like watch out for these cars. So anyway, so I bumped it up, and then the next race I did was easy mode, rain. It was in the rain. And so like rain is like, it's difficult in control because you like slip and stuff, but then it feels like with AI, it's just easier to deal with the AI for whatever reason. I don't know if other people experience that, or if I just feel like the AI kind of gets dumbed down a little bit in the rain, and where they're more cautious than they need to be or whatever. But anyways, the last race I did in my team mode, that's where I really had to struggle for multiple reasons. Number one, it was raining already, I think, to start, but then there was a yellow flag out there, and it was the first time that it happened to me in the game, and I was trying to assess, like, wait, what do you want me to do right now? I was just a little bit confused, because it's like, again, like you're managing all this information, and like, okay, well, you need to slow down, like, okay, slow down and slow down. And then like I finally sort of figured it out, but then there was this like timer that was on the screen, and then when I had slowed down enough, it went away, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess I'm good. I was like, no, you're not good. And so I sped up again, and then they gave me a penalty for going too fast under the virtual safety car. So I had to do a drive-through penalty. So basically that means like you have to go through the pit lane, and when you're going through the pit lane, you have a speed limit, and so then everybody gets up ahead of you. Nobody else has to do this because that's your penalty. And so I'm back in like 9th, 10th place, and like trying to regain position because of my penalty, and my gearbox starts breaking down. And I am in 5th place. I'm struggling to shift, and it sounds horrible. It's like, I'm like, oh gosh. And I'm just trying to maintain and make it through the race, and in a way that feels really good. You know, it feels good to like have to deal with these circumstances. And then the after effects of that is, after that race, now I need to change out my gearbox, but per FIA guidelines, your gearbox has to stay with you through 6 consecutive races. If you swap that out, that's a grid penalty. So you're going to start farther back in the race based on whatever your original qualifying position is, because you changed that gearbox. And so it's just like, okay, I can either risk going out with this faulty gearbox that may or may not shift when I want it to, or I'm going to take a grid penalty. So it's those kinds of things, those kinds of happenstances that, I think really
not many games
lend to the sport.
Not many racing games penalize you for going too fast. That's a new one. I haven't heard that. And do you have any idea what could have led to the gearbox failing, or is it just life?
It's really, it's partly how you drive it, and it's partly, durability, and so that's one of the things, like, as you get further in and you improve, your engineers improve your car and stuff more, than like you can make that stuff less likely to happen. So but I really appreciate that. I really like that. I want to talk about, I can't believe how long this has been already. I don't feel like I've talked this long.
Hour and a half races. We can at least go half an hour talking about it.
Sorry. I want to talk about some of the new circuits. There's Hanoi in Vietnam, and there's Zandvoort in Netherlands. Hanoi reminds me of the Australia course, where there's these really long open straights, and then you get on the back half, and it's a lot trickier. There's a lot more winding back there, and then you open it up again at the very end. Zandvoort, it's a historic circuit, but I guess it hasn't been in the F1 games. They talk about it as if it's new to F1. I haven't like done a checklist. It's like, was that ever in like 2007 or something? I don't know. But with that one, like, I just really felt like the rhythm of those apexes really well. It's like just the sense of the physics and the G-force of like when you're getting those curves right and when you're getting them wrong. It just pulls off in a really good way towards like when you're nailing it, it's like, yes, I feel like I'm nailing it. Like, this just feels right. The flow and how I'm going around those curves. The one problem, and somebody actually brought this up to me before I started playing the game, is that because of COVID, the actual race schedule for 2020 may not line up with what the game actually has.
Yeah,
because they have to do all this in a year in advance. They've got to get all this data. They've got to do laser scans. They've got to build up, how this track is going to change in different weather and how hot the asphalt is going to be and all that stuff. And they change the schedule. And they can't really change the game to be ahead of that. But then there's also some more concerning problems. The frame rate seems fine when I'm in a race, but for some reason in replays, it can be all over the place. It can look really bad and choppy in replays, and I'm not sure why. Wow. Maybe because it's rendering more cars at a time or whatever.
Sure.
The bigger problem, and this is actually a huge one, it's crashing like crazy. And
I saw you pleading on social media. Just like, I don't usually do this, but help. Like,
I wanted to see, but like it seems like other people are having these issues with crashes as well, whether it's PC or PlayStation or Xbox. It kind of doesn't matter. Not everybody's having crashes. And it also seems to be more frequent in the My Team mode than in other modes.
Oh.
And so like at one point I was worried because it's been hot the last few days or whatever, that like maybe my Xbox is overheating. Like, do I have to fix my Xbox? But it's oddly seems to be like very specific circumstances that like the game just doesn't want to get past. And so what the two trouble spots that I've had where it will just keep crashing like no matter what, I've been in like the first practice session of a race, and I'll get out there and I'll do one of the practice programs, and then I'll hit go back to a garage, and then black screen and back to the Xbox menu. Like the game is just completely dead when I try to go back to the garage. But what's odd is if I click restart session and just like negate all that progress, it can go back to the garage just fine. But
whoa. And it's tricky because you have to have the same Xbox for all 6 races. And if you get a new Xbox, then you get penalized and you get further back in line when you have to do the next race.
But yeah, so the first time this happened to me, I was able to sort of bypass it by skipping practice 1 altogether and going to practice 2. And I don't know whether it was something with the calendar or with the weather conditions or what.
Oh, there's so many things under the hood in this game. Who knows?
So many variables, right? So I don't know what it was, but for some reason, like after that, like I was able to get through practice 2, practice 3, rest of the race, and keep going just fine. Now that I'm on race 6, it's not letting me do that. Like even when I go and I try to like move over to the menu to advance to the next round, as soon as I get to, there's like a menu option that like lets you see like a camera feed of the other drivers that are currently out on track. As soon as I click the button, and you have to like get through these in sequence, right? You're like clicking the top shoulder button. So like click, get to that window and crash. And I've retried.
It's not
like
a good game to crash.
15, 20 times, and I cannot progress the My Team mode anymore.
Oh man!
So I just have to wait for a patch, and that's kind of where I have to leave the game right now.
Will this impression video get a patch? Will I check in with you later?
Probably not.
More info
Probably
about
not.
this.
But even if I do play the game more, I probably
Considering
won't say much
how
more about
many
it.
steps you have to do consecutively, that's a rough game to just quit on you. Because you're just like, I was right in the middle of I had, did 10 things and I had 10 more things to do before I was even finished with just this one arm of the game.
Or even, if I could potentially, like even if I was trying one thing, I was like, maybe if I save now and then come back to it. Yeah. But no, it was still at that point where it's just going to crash every time. I'm like, okay,
bummer.
Can't progress. So, yeah, I guess to wrap it up, I mean, these issues are issues. And so, maybe wait a couple of weeks and try it after they patch some things. I don't know. Otherwise, whether you're into this F1 compared to last F1s is going to be about how much more like those management features appeal to you, and like getting into like a lot of these nitty gritty of like really like seeing your car and your team progress over time and managing all the budgets and things like that. I know there's whole other games that are just management.
Yeah.
Is Gran Turismo, like actually it has like a whole side management thing in that series too. They're like, you're not racing, you're just managing. I'm like, okay.
But F1 just as a racing format is different than other types of racing too. So I imagine the career focus brings all of those elements to the forefront as well. So.
Yeah, and that's what I appreciate is that, these games do tackle racing in a way that most other racing games don't. There are other sims and like full-on hardcore sims that I wouldn't even necessarily call games. But I think F1, like I said, with all the options it gives you, it lets you find that sort of sweet spot for you. It's like, okay, I want an authentic experience, but I, am not crazy about having to specifically worry about traction control or I don't want to worry about practice sessions, or I don't care about F2, or like just right. All these different ways of approaching it, which I really appreciate.
Well, if you want updates on this very specific glitch, follow Daniel Bloodworth on Twitter. I hope that works out for you. Is it because this is something that, like they were saying, that follows the actual career and takes so long to get through some of this stuff? Do you see yourself just kind of slowly coming back to this, 1 week and then 2 weeks later and maybe a month after that, just kind of?
I actually kind of feel the opposite. I feel like I've got to be invested in this for a while, because it's you do have to kind of feel that out and like, okay, like really learn how to be involved in it. But I could see it going that way too, particularly if you were going to do, because I've done that in past years. Let me see what like a full length race is, and like, man, that's a job.
Yeah.
Like 60 or 70 laps without stopping.
Wow.
Like, woo. But yeah, thanks Brandon for listening to me ramble on, and thank you to everyone else, and hopefully there are some F1 fans that have actually gotten something out of this.
Thanks,
but good weekend worth of driving.
That's a race win. You've really been great today.